Welcome back to Know Your True Self. This is the final part of this teaching. Please make yourself comfortable.
Okay, so any more questions? Oh yes, you had one question.
So, number 7.
The I consciousness.
Isn't there a conflict there in the fact that you need to have I consciousness to be able to learn from your experiences, and to be able to hold your experiences as lessons, and you need to kind of take some ownership of those experiences and you want to learn. But you need to kind of, is there a conflict between that and saying that it's the cause of all problem?
Well, that sort of lesson doesn't necessarily happen in that consciousness specifically. This is just one aspect. As I was telling before, it's not like different, sort of a very distinct different layers. It's a whole, it's just different aspects. That specific one doesn't bring anything more to our experience, except for the sense of someone experiencing it. So there's you don't need that one to sort of get or understand your experiences or take something from them as a teaching or something like that. It's just a layer or a filter that will add to whatever other experiences you have or realizations or understanding, the sense of this is me experiencing. I know this is very subtle, and we can try to wrap our head around it, but it will come slowly as we observe this sense of me being here, experiencing, is everywhere. It sort of diffuses into any experience whatsoever, even in meditation. Sometimes we can experience a sense of such strong, say, relaxation, or we are so relaxed that it seems that the one who is experiencing it or sort of a little bit dissolves, not totally, just for 1 second or two. You can almost feel like, as one Zen teacher says, sounds hear themselves. It's like sound hearing itself, like if the observer or the one who is hearing had just disappeared. The experience didn't vanish, it's just that there is no one to be aware of the as a separate entity to experience it. But otherwise, even in meditation, if you don't get to that level of relaxation and stillness, there's always this sense of I am meditating or I am observing, or it's very subtle, and it won't probably be it won't be something that you say, or but it's there. There's always this notion of someone being a witness of what is happening, a witness or owner, or but there's definitely a sense of someone being there. Yes?
Would you say that Western psychology, psychotherapy in general, has many different approaches and understandings of what that might mean, that in general are working at the level of the seventh consciousness to kind of move it around, make it more livable, workable, this kind of thing? And would you say that?
Yes, yeah. Well, sixth and seventh, yeah. Because it has all, yeah. it has a lot to do, dysfunctional ego has a lot to do with identity and the way you have formed your sense of identity. As I was saying, if you're mainly retained dysfunctional aspects or unpleasant aspects of your experience, then you, for one, it will be a very painful sense of identity, and even a very distorted one, or a very unwholesome if you really identify yourself with different devious behavior or something like that. Still, and I think all psychotherapists, they all agree, saying that their patients could actually get better if they only wanted. It's not that easy, of course. It's not just they don't choose it, because everybody will tell you they want to get better. Of course they want, otherwise they wouldn't come and see you. But in truth, they are unable to let go of those dysfunctional parts, because even if they are very painful, just because they identify so strongly with it. Sometimes we hear people in an identity crisis, even having lost a husband that was violent, for instance, but they come to this point where they say some things like, if I don't have him anymore, I don't know who I am, or if things like this. And so it's quite a paradox, but we human beings are like this. So yes, I think psychotherapy works on the level of sixth consciousness, the mental consciousness, of course, but works in order to make egos livable. You can live with them, and so of course they don't. Their standing point is not. It is very different from Buddhism, because in Buddhism we know that it all functions like this, but the standing point is that actually it doesn't really matter, because that's not who you are. So I think that in opposing, it is different from psychotherapy, because you actually, by following we can say the Dharma is a psychotherapy in a sense, but you don't have, whereas in psychotherapy you really have to change, you would need to change a lot of things in yourself. If you look at it from the point of view of all of this being, just a mere construction and having no true existence, then yes, you have to work on your worst parts to make them more livable, but ultimately you just have to not believe in them. You know what I mean? If you see through and you see that this is definitely not who you are, and actually ultimately has no importance whatsoever, there is no need to correct everything. You just have to work on those really bits who are on the way, but then you aim to something much more essential, realizing that ultimately it's really not a problem if you have been unhappy when you were a child, or if you have been abused, or of course this is easy to say. I'm not meaning that it's easy to do, but and sometimes if the scars are too deep, people cannot follow even follow the Dharma. The Dharma is a psychotherapy, but in a sense it's not a psychotherapy, because it's not meant to repair the ego. It's meant to make us understand that the ego doesn't truly exist. So it's different approach, and if your ego is totally dysfunctional, the Dharma probably won't be able to help you. You first have to go through a process where it becomes manageable, and then, if ever that happens, and then eventually go a step further and and see a little bit through. And I think that's a bit the thing. And in the West, people tend to, when they are a bit desperate with with the psychiatrists and a bit tired of taking all sorts of drugs and pills and things like this, they tend to come to Buddhism as the last resource. Maybe this can help me. And but it won't be a replacement if your ego, if your mind is totally dysfunctional. It can even worsen your problems, because if you are an obsessive person, you will become obsessed with the Dharma, and then it won't do any good. On the contrary, there are many loonies in in Dharma centers. You can see many people coming totally unbalanced and with strange behaviors and things like this, because they just focused all their obsessions and all their unbalanced on Dharma, and then it becomes Dharma craziness or something like that. So it's two different approaches. I think psychotherapy is necessary and is very useful, but it goes until here, and Dharma can bring you much further. But if you have a relatively wholesome mind, functioning, more or less, because no one of us is totally sane. We know that, huh? Buddha is sane, but we are not, because we have a fundamental flaw. There's something that we have missed, So none of us is totally sane, but there is degree in insanity, and there are degrees in insanity, and some are workable and others just have to be treated separately, and then perhaps, This is, I think, something that when psychotherapists are Buddhists, they have to be aware of this. It's very important. Otherwise, you may tend to, bring one thing to the other, and it has different purposes. Yeah.
I don't know, it sort of seems to be linked over to psychotherapy and Buddhism is remove the element of blame from it. That something can be a fault, but no blame attached.
Yes.
Like if you have a wooden shelf and there's too much weight on it and it breaks, the fault was that the wood wasn't strong enough. There's not to blame for the fact it was not strong enough.
Yes. Yes. Well, actually, the concept of blame wasn't really present in the East. So they didn't even address that problem because they didn't have it.
It's conspicuous in its absence, isn't it?
Yes. So the teachers who, whether they are Westerners or even if they are Eastern people or Tibetans or that know well our frame of mind, our Western frame of mind, they started, addressing this problem because they knew it was a problem. They didn't have it, They had this sense of, there was a word for shame, but in the sense of, you yourself realizing that you did something that was not so awesome, something negative. And then there is a sense of shame that you realizing that others are aware that you did something which was not very good. But it's just a sense of acknowledging that and not beating yourself up. There is no moral, so to speak, or at least in our terms, there is no moral judgment about it. It's just that it doesn't serve the purpose. Yes. It's more in the basis of we don't even normally use the word like bad or wrongdoings or things like this. It's just negative and positive actions, because we all aware of the fact that we all want to be happy and none of us wants to suffer. So we can say negative is something that even though we do that aiming to have some comfort or something good coming out of it, just produces the opposite effect. That if you harm someone because you think that by harming that person you will get something good, then you're pretty sure that this is not going to happen. and just the opposite will happen. So it's a negative behavior in the sense that it will produce the opposite of what you are expecting. And then positive is just because we all want to be happy and none of us want to suffer. So positive behavior, it's something that will produce what you were expecting or you want to happen. And that's it. It's more like advice on dieting, this is wholesome and this is unwholesome. So if you want to be healthy and feel well, so you should do this and not that. But there's no moral judgment, and then there is no blame. And actually, even the blame that we inflict on ourselves is another way of holding on to the ego, actually. And even because we have such we have such a high opinion of ourselves that we can't live with the disappointment of not being perfect. So it's a sort of, you see what I mean? It is like it's like having been disappointed by someone from whom you had highest expectations. So if the person is not up to your standards, then you say, "Oh, this is an awful person." And so we do this with ourselves. We feel like we were supposed to know better, and then we let ourselves down, and we can't stand to be humiliated, to feel humiliated by ourselves. So we hold on to that, and sometimes that becomes a very important part of our identity.
Or indeed, some people I've met over the years who push it onto others because their ego won't allow them to make mistakes.
Yes.
They must blame others.
Yes.
Sometimes at times when nobody, even if you are with a blame mindset, nobody needs blaming, they'll still force it.
Yes, I find that the more we observe, it's not at all the same thing as being self-centered. It's just you observe yourself, you observe others. And then the more you realize that actually this idea that we have about ourselves is totally. We think of ourselves like someone who has this or that quality or this or that defect or this or that, I like this and I don't like that. And then we realize that throughout our lives, by accompanying with certain people, for instance, we are different. We had a different person according to the people we are surrounded with, and especially in close relationships, we tend to even, at the end, not know who we are anymore because we have adjusted so closely to being with another person. And a big part of our identity exists in association with that person, at least the one we have been used to. And so when the person goes away, that person takes with him or with her a big part of who we think we are, because that's the part we were with that person. So it also leaves a big empty space, because now we don't know how we're going to be if we are on our own or if we are with someone else. We will be a different person. And this shows that actually we are nothing or almost nothing. Not a big deal, anyway, that what we think we are depends so much on circumstances that we cannot really. There are a few trends. I'm not saying that we are absolutely nothing or we can't find sort of, but There are some trends, some stronger than others, but then in the details, it just depends so much on the circumstances. We all have seen ourselves react in very unexpected ways sometimes in different sets or in different situations. So we cannot really be sure of who we are, isn't it? On that level, at least. So there is really no blame. It's like the shed, or the example you said, it just broke because under those circumstances, the whole context, it couldn't hold the weight. So people also do things, we all do things, depending on different circumstances. And if we are pushed too hard to a certain point, then we will also, break down or do things that we couldn't think it was possible or things like this. So I think this helps a lot to understand and to sort of dissolve this sensation of this idea that we have that we are different from others, whether better or worse. It's the same. Actually, when someone feels like he's better than those who are around him, or if someone feels that he's worse than everybody, oh, I'm so bad, I'm really worse, I'm the worst person in the world, and things like this. Tomorrow I can say I'm the best, but saying one or the other is still the same. It means that you feel totally different from others, either better or worse. So what I think, of course, we're not going to let go of ego just in one go, but something that is quite a sign that you're starting to let go a little bit is when you realize that you're just like any other person, and under the same circumstances that those you are about to judge, if you were under the same circumstances, you probably would do the same. Or even worse, perhaps. So then you don't feel that you are different, or that you should be different. This is also a common trap for Buddhists, is that they say to themselves when we watch ourselves doing something not so good, we say to ourselves, now, after all these years of practicing Buddhist, I should have known better, It's still a way to think good of yourself, or have sort of high expectations. Why should you? I mean, we're all human beings, and under normal or slightly difficult circumstances, we can cope. But then if it's something really very strong or very intense, something that really shakens our sense of identity, we'll probably react like everyone else, Or in the best, at the best, we might have a different awareness, knowing that we are, that this actually doesn't exist, even if it makes you feel awful, But in essence, if it's really shaking you, and if it really goes to the core of our attachment and our sense of identity, you will probably have moments of insanity like anyone else, So equanimity is one of the 4 boundless qualities of an enlightened mind. Equanimity is not only, finding the common ground between our friends and enemies. It's essentially finding the common ground between self and others. Or, in other words, not feeling that we are anyhow different from anyone. We are all human beings, and we have all our dark sides and nice sides, and under different circumstances we are sort of, almost everybody is capable of anything, Of course, some people are so trained, if we think about Dalai Lama or any great teacher, we're pretty sure that even under very strenuous conditions they would probably never have certain actions or attitudes. But beyond that, it's quite uncertain. It depends on so many things. So we're just ordinary beings trying to do the best, and unless and until we have really come into terms with that, had discovered and realized and experienced who we truly are, we'll always still be flawed by the conceptualizing of an I, an existing entity that we try to defend at all costs, and and for that, going to any extent. I mean, sometimes. So that's it. Yeah.
Talking about numbers, and I haven't been here from the beginning. Personally, in the last few years, I had a lot of occurrence of number 8 in my life. And I would like to know what's the meaning from your perspective, number 8.
What, you mean the fundamental consciousness? Or, no, you mean just the number 8?
Yeah, because I started speaking about numbers.
Yeah, well, this is because we were talking about different levels of consciousness. And just because we said there were 5 consciousness related to the 5 senses, and then there is mental consciousness, that's the 6th, and then the consciousness of the I, and then 8th consciousness, which is the fundamental ground, sort of it's like the vessel on the top of which, or the basis on the top of which all these sophisticated levels come, But it's just a way of explaining, There's no fundamental meaning on the numbers. It's just a way of explaining, and then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's it. So what you're saying is that in the last few years you have been number 8, like the number itself, or things.
There are 8 jhanas. There's 8 meditative states of absorption. So the 8th jhana is basically as you become more and more concentrated, more and more absorbed. The 8th jhana is when you completely lose even a sense of being or becoming self or non-self. So it's kind of like you're not enlightened, but it's pretty much that's as far as you can go without being enlightened, and most people don't access
easily.
You might have moments of clear insight in your life, but it's meant to be something that you can practically attain.
I'm not.
Personally,
Yeah. Well, these old things, these are many different explanations and levels and things. I think they're useful to a certain extent, but then, have to make sense for your own experience. I'm not very familiar with this sort of teachings, so I'm not sure I can really give any interesting answer. Yes, Cesare?
The alaya, or the 8th level of mind, is that what is termed as like awareness or ripper in tradition, or is it something else?
Yeah, it is. But when you say alaya, there is alaya, and then there is alaya vishnana. And alaya is this ground level, but not enlightened. So it is the basic consciousness, but not enlightened. And when you say alaya vishnana is nana is wisdom. So it is the enlightened ground consciousness. So it's the same. It's just whether you see it or not. You see? You recognize it or not. So that level of alaya vishnana is, yes, it's wisdom, rikpa, or whatever words, there are many different words for that. But Buddhahood or Buddha nature, all of those. So it is the same ground consciousness, but whether it's if you are aware of it, or if you see it clearly, or if it's really enlightened or not.
And is it,
No, it's okay.
so is it like, you said earlier on, like all of the methods in the Dharma are to kind of wear away this seventh idea of separate self. So is it like a wearing away? Is it more just to relating to it differently and seeing that it isn't really, or is that just the same thing?
I think it's the same. Yeah, wearing it away, it can only come through seeing that through insight, through seeing that it doesn't exist, and not only, as I was saying this morning, repeatedly seeing it, and until to the point where even when you're not meditating or even in your ordinary life, the grip of this and the habit of this sort of reaction popping up whenever you're threatened, you feel threatened or confronted, will just weighing down, until the point where you won't react like that anymore, because it was just removed, or it has no ground, starts to have no ground. But it takes a long time, because it's a very subtle, that's what they call habitual tendency, is a very subtle reaction that will just pop up automatically whenever there is a threat or something that is considered as a threat to the sense of identity, even if you have seen it as being empty. But there's still this, Sometimes they say in the text, I like this image, they say it's like a bottle of perfume, that it's now empty. But when you open it, still smells like. You see? So it's empty. You know it's empty, you have seen it, but the scent is still there, so it still pops up. And then there are levels there. Then first you might still react, and then you don't react, but there's still this boops, but you're or something there, you see here it goes again, and then finally it will just vanish.
There'll be no.
Yeah. I suppose.
No perfume.
No perfume, yeah, the scent is gone.
So for those of us where it still pops up,
Yeah.
So if we're able to have some kind of watchfulness in that moment, you can just observe it, right? Or kind of use it to just remind us to look at our awareness again. Is that?
Yeah, well, then there are lots of methods. Yeah, I think and the method, it depends on many things. The method that you can use depends on each person, or how much training you have had, or in different circumstances also. Mind training can help. Like, mind training is more on the basis of dialogue and argument with, because whenever anything is considered as a threat, it only can exist, this feeling only comes if you have told yourself a certain story about what is happening, or it is unjust, or, this person shouldn't react like this, or, So through mind training, and of course through realizing that actually it is empty by nature, you start to understand that you just have to change the story, and then you change the reaction. So mind training is a little bit based on that. You know that if you start looking it from another angle, the reaction will just fall apart, because it won't have any reason.
Buddhist NLP.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly. But then there are other approaches. You can, mind training is very helpful in these sort of situations, because it's a sort of it's keeping your mind flexible, and it can be very practical also. But then you can have other approaches. Some people, just would recite a mantra or visualize a deity, or this is another totally different approach. But you can also just see through and, just stay still or remain still, remain an observer and see how this stuff pop up and then let it dissolve. That's another level or another way. It might depend a lot, not only on your training, but also on the circumstance or how it pops up. If at that time you are in the middle of lots of things, it will be more difficult. Or if you have time to retreat, to go to some quiet place before having to have an action, for instance, then you can work with your emotion or work with whatever you're arising in order to, understand it and, learn how to cool off and see and find a better way to deal with it. So it depends on lots of things, but every one of us has to find his own way every time. And even sometimes a certain type of argument will work for 2 or 3 times or in 2 or 3 circumstances, and then it will stop working because you have used it. And then you have to find another one, and that's how it works. But definitely these reactions will keep popping up, for a long time probably. So we have to learn how to deal with them and not be excessively impatient or even angry with ourselves if we don't manage to do it in as well as we would like. There is no blame. It's just acknowledging it and then saying to oneself that, okay, it didn't go so well this time, but then I'll try again. Next time will be better, perhaps. I really want it to work, so next time I'll try again. So it's a very sort of dispassionate approach. It's more pragmatic and very down to earth, no drama. Drama is what ego feeds itself from. So whenever we feel we are ourselves in the middle of a big drama, we can be pretty sure that ego is playing around. Yeah, it's the sort of it's this intensity of drama and this is terrible. I will never recover from this. This is really awful. Nobody is as unhappy as I am, or all of this stuff. It's all part of ego's soap opera. That's also why we like soap operas, because when there is not enough drama in our lives, we turn on TV, and there's not plenty of drama in other people's lives to entertain our ego.
We create one.
Oh, yes, we create one, yeah. Yes? The what?
The right relationship, what's the right way to relate to drama in ourselves?
But perhaps sense of humor? It's one way, but you can't be scornful if someone, comes with a big drama. You can just start laughing because we'll probably not have many patients or many clients if you do that. You have, in order to be able to do that, or when you feel like laughing about other people's dramas, you have to be sure that you can laugh of your own dramas, and you know what I mean? But yeah, sense of humor is one thing, and that's something you can really have with your own dramas. With our own dramas, sense of humor works quite well. But towards the drama of others, I think we shouldn't, especially if we are a psychotherapist, it's very important not to get caught in that, of course. Not overdo it in any of the senses. I mean, not overdoing, underestimating it, and not overdoing in giving a lot of importance. You see, so it's a sort of middle way balance of a more grounded attitude in which you can begin to make the distinction between the actual problem and the reaction to that problem. Like the example I gave about the person who has no money to drive the car and goes on public transportation. Okay? The actual situation is quite simple. There's no drama in it. You just have to leave your car parked in front of your house and take a bus. Once you know the timetable and you know all of that, it's as simple as driving your car, perhaps even better. You know? So there is no drama in that. But the person might make a drama, and the drama that may happen is because what we said is because for her or him, it's something that is very much a sort of degradation of the sense of identity, and so I think we have.
Is to do with this not having any control over the situation.
Also, yeah.
So if the person sold his car because he said, "Oh, I can't really use it for this journey, and what am I keeping it for?" Then even if he's taking public transport, it would have a different meaning.
Yes.
And a different impact. But it's because there is a sense of I have no control.
And I have no choice. Yes, of course. But if you can point out to the person in kind of slowly and not excessively, can I say, stressing, not stressing too much, but if you can point to the person that actually taking a public transportation in itself, it's not a problem. And trying to point out the difference between the two things in a soft way, maybe it will help the person to adjust to this new situation. Seeing that it's not that dramatic if he takes a bus, and slowly that will perhaps become less painful. But it's not easy because, of course, many times people come to a psychotherapist not really to be cured, but to have someone to talk with and to, just someone who will agree with them in saying, "Oh yes, how terrible," But since they cannot trust their friends, go to someone and pay someone to agree with them, someone who will not use that in a conversation with the friends or something. There is an agreement of confidentiality, so it's fine. I can tell him everything. So it's not easy. I imagine it might be quite difficult, but at least if the person can begin to see that there are two different problems, and the practical one is not the problem, there's always a solution, then maybe we will relax a little bit about the other one, That if he understands that the other one is more like a creation of his own mind, and it's not an actual problem, at least a little bit, might be very difficult. Yeah, might be very difficult. Well, that's why they pay you for. It's because they can't sort it out by themselves, you know. So being a therapist is really a challenge, isn't it? I think it is. I think it is. Much more so than being a doctor. You know? A broken leg, you know, is something very objective. It's just bone, and you know, you put some plaster and it's okay. But mind is so subtle and so complex and rules everything. So it's difficult. Okay, shall we keep some for tomorrow? Yeah, well, if you're coming tomorrow, then we see each other tomorrow. If you don't come tomorrow, it has been a pleasure to be here, and I hope it was useful, and some things became clear. Everything doesn't come clear in one go, you know, it keeps becoming clearer and clearer with time, and every time we hear sometimes the same things we have already heard 100 times, there is a small insight. It's, oh yes, that's what it meant. I never understood it like that. It happens to everyone, even if after many years. So I hope something like that happened, at least a little insight somewhere, and that you can use in your own lives and make them better or easier or something. So thank you so much.